doing jiu-jitsu is going to get you in shape.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
That's half of why you're doing
100%.
it. You know what I mean? It's just a fun thing to do to get in shape, right? Nobody likes to run on a treadmill, or even just running for an hour endlessly is just daunting. But when you say, hey, you're going to do an hour of jiu-jitsu, suddenly it's like, okay, I like that.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Taking Action. I'm your host, Michael Allen, and today I'm joined with my co-host, Ryan Peaton, and also Dru Hillyard. Dru Hillyard is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and also owns Evolution BJJ St. John's. Dru, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're excited to have you here. I've had my first session with you today, and now we're locked in for 10 sessions over the next month.
We are.
So that's going to be exciting. Today he took it easy on me. He didn't kill me. He gave me some insane chokes, which
pretty cool.
It's amazing how when you break down a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu move, like a submission move, every little step gets you a little bit more suffocated. I felt like I was a mouse and like a python or some sort of constrictor was just suffocating me. And it's amazing. As Dru was telling me today, He was showing me a collar choke. What's the proper term?
Cross collar choke.
A cross collar choke.
Yep.
And as you put your arm in, you make sure you move your wrist. And then the next stage is you reach around and you push the guy's head to the side. So that stops him from breathing. And then you grab a hold of his shoulder and then you lean on him. And like every little thing, you start to get more and more suffocated. And then you put your weight on them. And then you're like, okay, I'm ready to tap now. And then you expand with your body. Almost reminded me of yoga. Expanding into a stretch. And it is insane because I didn't feel like I could hold my breath. I was like, sometimes you're thinking like, oh, if I need to, I can hold my breath. But this is different. It's like you can feel the life get sucked out.
So it's not an oxygen choke, right?
Yeah.
The thing about it is it's a blood choke. So what it does is the carotid arteries get stopped. Mm-hmm. And so the blood flow to the head stops. So you just kind of pass out. Sometimes I have a guy who just went to sleep at a local tournament. And that's what happened. He thought he was okay, defending the choke like nothing was happening, and then out. Right? So it's like, it's like sometimes you can't even feel it. Sometimes you can feel the pressure on your neck, obviously, but sometimes as if it's right on the right spot, they can go out without warning. Like, it's pretty unreal. Yeah.
That's cool. And it happened all in like half a second.
Oh, yeah.
It happened so fast.
Super safe, super fast. That's jiu-jitsu in a nutshell, right? Yeah. Controlled manipulation of your opponent safely. You know what I mean? We all want to get out of there safe, right?
Yeah.
Of any situation, I guess, really.
You don't want anybody dying at your class.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Well, I know Ryan's excited to talk about some business questions, but before we get into those, tell me a little bit and tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to a black belt.
Sure. Okay, so if we go all the way back to, the beginning, it was like probably mid-2000s, I started training in the shed of one of my friends. And he had done seminars here in St. John's and had trained with a couple jiu-jitsu practitioners across East Canada. So he was like the only guy that really had any sort of knowledge or awareness of any techniques or anything like that. And this guy was like 120 pounds soaking wet. Like, he's a small guy. And so obviously when I started training with him in his shed, I was thinking, just like everybody else, I'm tougher than this guy. And then once you see before your eyes that you are absolutely helpless, you know what I mean, as an average Joe who doesn't know anything, then it humbles you instantly. You know what I mean? You can see the effects of it right away. It took you one session to realize, okay, this is real. You know what I mean? And it's the same thing. So even though we were in a shed on Walmart puzzle mats, the proof was there. You know what I mean? It's all I needed to really see. So I started training with him religiously. Like, we would do 3, 4, 5 times a week. And then eventually it was, we moved to a dojo in Grand Falls. And between the jigs and reels, I had to relocate because obviously my former military experience and stuff like that, I had to obviously travel for that. And so with that, I got to train, had a bunch of different spots. I got to train in New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, all those different places until eventually I resettled back here into St. John's. And I trained at a bunch of gyms locally. It's just too many to name. I pretty much tried them all out, you know what I mean, and got a feel for it. But nothing was really pulling me in like I had seen at other clubs. So I had visited a couple clubs in the mainland and seen how they kind of ran and did things. and realized like that's what I wanted and needed. You know what I mean? And because that culture and community wasn't here, it's one of those things where I could stay at a place where I'm unhappy and just kind of coasting, or I could try to make something out of nothing, right? Mm-hmm. So I got in contact with a guy here who was in the military, and he had connections with a black belt in Ottawa, which was Steve Burgess. And Steve had done seminars way back in the 90s here in Newfoundland. He was one of the first black belts to ever come to Newfoundland and teach. He wasn't a black belt at the time. He was a blue belt at the time, but you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah,
so he was one of the first. And so, yeah, I met him, and we clicked right away. And I had met the other black belt professor, Dan Guillemet, through one of my kickboxing fights in Halifax. So he had one of his fighters on that same card. And so when I met Dan, it was like we clicked really well. Like it was like, you know, father figure type deal. I could express anything to him. I could bring him any questions I have. And so when I found somebody really that savvy, and he has really close ties when it comes to like lineage, which now, talking about how jiu-jitsu was different back then from now, one of the major differences is lineage was a really important thing back then. Because you wanted to make sure that the art was legitimate. So you'd had to be under like certain amount of people, you know what I mean? So basically they migrated Japanese jiu-jitsu to Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and then got North Americanized when they started coming to North America and teaching it in North America. So Dan is right under Marcelo Garcia, which is, if you Google or YouTube anything about jiu-jitsu, Marcelo Garcia is a name that's going to pop up, right? So he was one of my favorite practitioners at the time and seemed like a good fit. So I reached out to Dan and asked him could I be affiliated with his brand, and he was ecstatic.
And that's Evolution?
Yeah, which is Evolution. And Evolution is international. So we have some in like Greece, like, you know, and all over, right?
So is it a franchise? Evolution?
It's a franchise, yeah. Yeah, these two guys that I'm talking about now, Steve Burgess and Dan Guillemet, they started Evolution together.
Okay.
And it was labeled something else before Evolution, but then they did their own thing, and then they made it international.
So this is serious stuff. You can't just go and get a black belt and then just say, oh, I'm just going to start my own.
No, you absolutely can't. No, yeah. It takes a few times. And even to be presented a black belt, the black belt who's promoting you has to be recognized and registered under a certain program.
Okay.
And he's had to have so many years at that rank before he's able to promote black belts himself.
Right.
So it's very like strict structure, or it was, you know what I mean? And maybe not so much anymore, but
You think it's have to loosen it up?
for then, I would say the guidelines for what is required to be a black belt is definitely loosened, but like skill wise, definitely not.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? There was just a lot of red tape, and with that came a lot of gatekeeping too.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So there's always that little bit of weird corruptionness when it comes to like hierarchy.
Right.
Right? So jiu-jitsu became less about the hierarchy and more about actual skill.
Yeah. And that's something that always
You know?
interests me is what skills does a black belt have, or what skills does a blue belt have? Like, how do you know when you're at a certain level?
People have the different approaches to it. For example, you can get people who go through it's almost like a course, right? It's
Yeah, you're talking about this, and I'm thinking there's different training. Like it's usually more, or maybe it's not more formal. But you know, there's universities and post-secondary schools, and you go to get a degree, and you become a doctor, lawyer, a business engineer, you name it.
Yep.
So there's all this structure in place. I had no idea that this structure existed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What you're describing is exactly how it's laid out. It's curriculum based. So everybody's curriculum is different, right? My curriculum is different from the gyms down the road, which is different from the gyms in Montreal. You know what I mean? So that's also another good thing that you can pull from lineage too, because the older the gyms, obviously, and the older the guys that have been doing the jiu-jitsu for long amounts of time, they have kind of the format. They have it down to a science of where, like, here's where we start to get the most out of, you know, the basic lessons, how to move your body, how to perform the basic techniques, and how to, like, grow out of that. But there is usually a standard. Like, there is a white to blue belt curriculum, and then there's a blue to purple belt curriculum. again, not every gym is the same, but generally that's what you're going to see, right? So it very much is like post-secondary or like school.
Yeah, like a school curriculum. That's mostly where my background is in education and in different courses and different programs that I've done over the years is very much the same. It makes sense that it would be similar for, getting the different colors of belts and moving up through it. But the history and what's required, I had no idea about.
Yeah,
That's super interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of like a gray area again. Like I said, like it's becoming less prominent now, but you still have to have a black belt promote you and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it makes sense
But,
when you think about it. I never thought about it.
Yeah. So it is a weird hierarchy in a way, or it used to be, but we're slowly moving away from that, and it's becoming more about skill set and application of knowledge.
Right.
Right. But again, everybody is met where they are, and not where you expect them to be. Right.
Right.
So,
Well, okay.
So what do you?
Dive into that in a second.
Yeah,
Go back and unpack that a little bit. What do you mean?
Well, you can could go lots of different paths with that one, right?
Yeah.
So basically, that comes down to, again, community and what you expect out of, your gym or your club or your facility.
Right.
Like for me, I'm not going to hold a 20-year-old MMA fighter athlete who wants to compete in a cage to the same standard as a 45-year-old dad.
Fair.
Right.
You get what I'm saying? But they can both understand the basic concepts of a technique and how it's applied and how it works.
Mm-hmm.
The 20-year-old is going to be able to apply that on anybody he wishes. The 45-year-old is probably going to struggle against the younger or the more agile or the more strong.
Sure.
You get what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm not going to hinder his ranking because he can recite to me exactly what it takes to perform the move. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
Just because he can't perform it on somebody half his age doesn't mean that he doesn't deserve the rank that he's at.
Okay.
Interesting.
You get what I mean? So
Yeah, I do.
there is the old wise saying, like jiu-jitsu is the gentle art, or jiu-jitsu is always the art that the smaller opponent has a chance or can win, which is absolutely true. If you're the same age, if you're competitive in mindset, there's a lot of other qualities that go into that.
I had a girl who does jiu-jitsu. She's been doing it for years. She told me that, I don't know how accurate this is, but I'll run it by you. She said every belt roughly represents you being able to tackle somebody 50 pounds heavier. Have you ever heard that before? Is that accurate?
Yeah. So usually what it is 20 pounds.
Oh, okay.
So the 20-pound advantage. So if they're like 15 to 20 pounds heavier than you, that's like a belt rank.
Okay.
And that goes with age too. So if they're 10 to 15 years younger than you, that goes with a belt rank. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like if you're comparing yourself to a 20-year-old blue belt who's super athletic, who's been doing this for a while, who outweighs you by 40 pounds, really that's like rolling with a brown or black belt.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So you can kind of judge it based off that.
Yeah.
So again, a white belt comes in. He's a Division I wrestler. He's grappled all of his life. He's athletic as hell. He's 22 and there's no quit in him. Right? You put him against a 30-year-old single mom who's just there to get exercise. Obviously, he's going to win despite her being a purple belt or not.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just a piece of fabric at the end of the day. Like, let's
Let's
be
talk-
realistic, right?
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about that. So when you're actively competing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and even I guess not so much for the people who are doing it for exercise, but when you're competing, what's required physically and what's required mentally to really succeed in that sport?
So there's lots of things it takes to succeed. I have to jog my memory here.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
one of the things that I think is most important is discipline at the end of the day, right? Motivation is always fleeting, but discipline is something that you have to do no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
So just like we wash ourselves, just like we feed ourselves,
Right.
you kind of have to prioritize this as one of those things.
Do you
right?
think the military helped you with that? Do you think you got discipline from, like, the military is known for giving people discipline. Do you think that helped you in getting your black belt?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely 100%. Even just having the perseverance to bite down when things get difficult.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's all part of someone's learning journey.
Yeah.
And I think the military accelerates that because it forces you to under immense pressure, right?
Right.
So
Absolutely.
yeah. But there's definitely the discipline. You have to have a growth mindset.
Yeah.
So if you're used to like coasting, you will coast in jiu-jitsu. If you're an overachiever, you will achieve more at an accelerated rate. Because it's just like anything else. I tell all my students, like, when you show up, you can physically be there, and be totally checked out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So just because you're showing up, you have to still put forth effort, right? Like it's like anything in life. I could show up and be present, but if I'm not putting the effort and the time in, then I'm not going to see any results.
Yeah.
So the difference in somebody just coming in and running through the class and kind of half into it, half out of it on their phone, leaves and isn't really sweating, as opposed to somebody who's studied beforehand, reviewed their notes, watched a video, is now trying to apply it, is focused in on the engagement and the details of why, is staring at you in the face and asking questions. They're obviously going to get more from it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they're putting in all this extra effort. They're going to reap the benefits of it.
That's right.
So you can, it all depends on what you bring to the table, just like anything else in life, right? You nourish it, you're going to see results.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's that. I find that people who take jiu-jitsu as a seeking of knowledge as opposed to a physical activity, they are more likely to spend longer times at it and spend more.
Yeah, it's almost like a continuous growth mindset in the fact that you're not just in it to learn how to defend yourself. You're in it because you understand there's more to it behind the scenes.
There is more to it behind the scenes, and it's not like it's not just like an exercise.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, exercise is a benefit of it, but that happens as a result regardless. You know what I mean? The more that you do it, it's going to feel less like an exercise. It's mentally stimulating. It draws you in.
It's funny, actually. I relate a lot to climbing. So climbing is exercise as well, but in climbing, technique is extremely important. And not only physical technique is important, but also understanding that when you see somebody else do a move, now you know that move is doable, and it makes it easier for you. It's like a 3D puzzle for the body.
Absolutely.
Right? And I see Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as something very similar. It's puzzles. Someone, and chess very much. Someone puts their arm there, like you said, and we'll get into, I want to dive a little bit back into, you mentioned this morning, the 3 dots in the Evolution logo, and how you're just kind of cycling people through systems in which they're trapped. So Drew was saying to me today that there's a process in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I might get this a little bit wrong because I'm so new to it, but you basically set up one move in order to lead somebody to another move, and then when they defend that, you get them into a third move, and then you cycle through those 3, and they're stuck.
So you're playing chess with the human body.
You are, absolutely. And like Mike pretty much summed up, we have one of our logos, which is 3 dots and a right angle, okay? Because everything is all about angles and leverage in Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
So we talk about laws, right? That's the acronym.
So you're teaching physics too now.
Absolutely. Leverage, angles, weight, and space, right? And that's the 4 qualities that you have to manipulate. So there's lots of different things. Like I said, it's much like education. You're going to learn a lot about how to manipulate a human body too, which makes it easier, right? Using these 4 principles.
Right.
And so the right angle stands for angles, obviously, but the 3 dots symbolize that system mentality. So not everybody does this. This is just a part of kind of like our theory and philosophy, you know what I mean, here at Evolution. So it's, if you give them one direct path of choice, there's always 2 choices in that path. There's never like one thing that they have to do. There's always a couple choices. But if you narrow those choices down and you know what to expect, eventually, if you keep switching between these 3 things, theoretically, they'll make a mistake at some point in time.
Yeah.
Because you can defend one subconsciously, and then you can think about another that they're going to do, but then the third one creeps up. And now suddenly there becomes more than just 2 choices. And so in between them thinking about what the next choice is going to be is kind of where you
Take advantage.
right?
So this is where, what would you call it, muscle memory comes in?
Muscle memory is huge.
So
Huge.
the more you do it, the less you have to think about it. The less you have to think about it, the faster you get. Is that right?
Absolutely. I told Mike this morning when we were talking about it, it's like the analogy of riding a bike. When you first hop on a bike, you're thinking about, okay, I have to balance. I have to put one foot up. I have to push off. I have to pedal. You're thinking about all these different things that you have to do. You're trying to maintain the bike sturdy, right? Eventually, over time, you hop on the bike, you go.
Yes.
You don't think about turning which way or, using your legs.
So I think that for someone who's never had any type of martial arts defensive fighting class, we'll say, in their life, I've always been curious, I'll admit, but I've never. To me, it sounds, it's really just, and I'm not trying to simplify it, but it's another sport. people who are truly great at their sport practice to get muscle memory. It's a discipline, and I like what you said earlier that motivation is fleeting.
Mm-hmm.
I want to bring that to the to the end. That hit me hard just then. I was like, "Whoa, that's right." A lot of people will get fed up in their day to day, and they want to start a business, and they get motivated because they had a bad day at work, and then the next thing you know, they go to work the next day, but it's not as bad. The motivation drops.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the discipline.
It is
to work on your business plan, to day after day, to do the same things day after day, to get up and keep going, whether it's good or whether it's bad, and go into a certain direction that you want to go into. But yeah, so it's just like any other sport.
It is.
If
Absolutely.
you want to become great, you have to have discipline. You got to keep working at it. You got to be into it. You got to focus. You can't just be physically there. You have to be mentally there as well.
100%.
Or you won't excel at it.
Yeah. And the best thing about jiu-jitsu, aside from other sports, is that literally anybody can do it. And I don't say that like blowing smoke. I say that as literally anyone can do it, despite any physical limitations, health limitations, anything. They can do BJJ. Right? Okay. So it just has to be tailored.
As a common person, not fully believing you.
Yeah, no, 100%. It absolutely can be. You see living proof of it all the time online.
Yeah.
And I think people always have this fear in their head of I have to get in shape before I try it, or I have to be this flexible, or I have to be this strong. You don't.
It's funny though. I actually did that exact thing. Mm-hmm. So I started at the beginning of this year. I started going to the gym religiously, down to the base gym. And then now I've replaced the base gym, and I was climbing as well. Yeah. And now I've replaced that with jiu-jitsu.
Doing jiu-jitsu is going to get you in shape.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
That's half of what you're doing.
Oh, 100%.
You know what I mean? It's just a fun thing to do to get in shape.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody likes to run on a treadmill, or even just running for an hour endlessly is just daunting. But when you say, hey, you're going to do an hour of jiu-jitsu, suddenly it's like, okay, I like that. Right? Yeah. Like, that's not so bad. If I told you, let's run for an hour, you would say no. Right? Most likely, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That reminds me, actually, I did a couple base sessions with Jeremy Budgell, and I think there was probably 3 or 4 of us there during that time. And it was the second time in my life that I almost puked from a workout. The first time was in the military when I did some sort of race and came first, but had eaten Dairy Queen the night before. Just didn't go well. But it was amazing just how worked I was after. I think we rolled for probably like 10 minutes. And, you know, I once again didn't know anything really, so just got like my shirt handed. Yeah, absolutely mauled. Yeah. But it was good. It was the first taste for me, and I was like, okay, I gotta.
So I think a lot of people would be intimidated to, especially someone, let's say 37 years old, white male, but 170 pounds.
Yeah, for sure.
Me.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of making a joke, but no, seriously. I think if you've never been into it, and you're into your 30s, and I would think you're gonna walk in to like your gym and see a bunch of kids around, or if not a bunch of kids who are in excellent shape with piles of energy, you're just gonna crawl at one side and down the other. It's gonna be some older, I'm gonna say older, quote, into their 30s and 40s, but they've been at it their whole lives.
Absolutely not. No, that's the biggest misconception. I always tell people, if you're at all interested, walk through the doors. Our retention rate is almost 100%.
So once
people see the community and what it's about and how our environment is there, they don't want to go. They don't want to leave.
Oh, okay. So it's very inviting.
Like I have 50-year-olds there that are not in the greatest shape, that enjoy the learning aspect of jiu-jitsu. They come, they train, and like I said, you meet people where you're at. So I'm not gonna be aggressive and try to hurt a female who's really small or an older male. I'm there to give them what they want out of the benefit of the jiu-jitsu class. Okay. So whether that's exercise or just the social aspect, you get some people who just come in and sip on a coffee and they'll just chat and they'll just talk about jiu-jitsu. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's much more than what people think it is.
What about on this topic now? Because it's popped up when I did some martial arts training before. Nothing crazy, just dip my toe in some Jeet Kune Do. But there has been a fear in my mind of going into a gym and, oftentimes you'll rotate with partners and somebody doing something stupid and then injuring you. Do you see that often, or what's the gym
because I
mentality?
don't foster that culture, right?
Yeah.
And I don't foster that mentality. So that is generally when you see things like that happen. If you hear like high injury rate or people getting hurt or people not taking care of each other, it's to deal with higher than the students. So it's to deal with the mentor, or the person who's running the classes, or the person who's coaching. Because that's one of my jobs, is I'm monitoring. Hey, this guy's going too hard on this person who's just trying to test himself. Hey, dial it down. You know what I mean? You have to harness that kind of culture, and all my people do that because I've developed that throughout years of reinforcing the rules and kind of making it what you want it, right? So
Bad for business too, I guess, if people are getting injured and not
it's
coming
bad
back
for
to class.
business too. Yeah, absolutely. But most importantly, like, I just care about these people. I don't want to see them get hurt. You know what I mean? If I got a guy who can't work and can't provide for his family, that doesn't just hurt my business, that hurts me personally, because I don't want to see that happen to him.
Right.
Yeah.
We're perfectly
You know
on the
what I mean?
topic now, which is something that I wanted to chat about, is when you're competing and you're training to such a high extent, like, how do you manage injuries? I have a friend, Richard Kanasevich, who's a black belt from Atos. And when I think back working on the rigs with him, he always had some sort of injury, but he was just like normal life for him. Like, it didn't bother him. It didn't affect him. I don't know if he was so used to it or if he just had a strong mindset. What's the approach with injuries? How do you treat them?
So biggest thing with injuries is always preventative, right?
Yeah.
Before and after classes, stretch, eat well, lots of rest, ice, elevate, all the stuff that they always tell you to do.
Great. This guy's telling me to get a cold plunge too.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Right. Cold plunge is the big thing now, right? That everybody's into. So without all that, right, you got to understand that what we're doing is physical and it is combat. So it kind of comes with how you take it, right? So if I'm being super competitive and I'm pushing every class like it's my last, and I'm always going, you know what I mean? And I'm always picking the harder roles, and I don't take breaks, and I don't do the nurturing, clearly I'm going to see the same results as that. I'm going to get hurt, right? In saying that, it is combat, accidents happen, right? But for the most part, you can mitigate that just by communication. So again, like you said, one of your biggest fears is some guy's going to grab a hold of me and he's going to hurt me, right? The onus is on you to communicate what you're comfortable with, right? And if anybody gives you grief over that, that's when you come to me, right? So if you communicate to your training partner, hey, I'm sore, I don't want to go that hard today, and he's not reciprocating the level that you want, you either get a new training partner or you let me know, we deal with the situation, right? So it's like, you don't have to feel all these weird emotions and all this like tension here because one guy's going too rough on you. Instead, you could just be like, I don't want to partake in this.
Right. And let's
Just
talk
like anything else, right?
Let's talk about somebody who's competing. Are there people out there who are competing and trying to progress in jiu-jitsu and they're just constantly managing injuries? Like, they're just working through it. They just keep training.
Absolutely. Every competitor with any sort of combat art is going to have multiple injuries, and they're going to have to learn to deal with them. That's just the way it is. Because you're doing it at such a high intensity and at such a velocity that it's bound to happen. You know what I mean? There's just deterioration over time if you've done it for so long. There's also just pressure on joints, etc., right? So you're going to develop arthritis, right? I have severe arthritis in my shoulder. So it's just like, after so long, you're going to develop things. But again, you'd probably develop those anyways. And who's to say you wouldn't develop them at a faster rate if you weren't training?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because the worst thing that you can do for yourself is become,
Like sedentary.
And not do anything. And then you just kind of wither away, right? So a good friend of mine, he said it to me a while ago, and I always use it when somebody asks me this question about injuries. And I'll say it to this day, is better to burn out than fade away. Right? So it's like, I would rather do what I love until I can't,
right,
than not do it at all.
Yeah, that reminds me of another really good quote. I forget who it's by now, but he said, at the end of my life, I want to have looked back and have used up my body. I don't want to die with a pristine looking body.
Absolutely.
He's like, I want to die. I don't want to be scarred and ragged. And
we're all ending up in the same place.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What mileage you put on yours is up to you. You know, it just, that's the way it goes. But to answer your question, yes, it is a part of the lifestyle at the highest levels.
Right.
Right? Again, for a hobbyist should have no reason why they're getting injured, because it's kind of in your hands. outside of accidents, like freak accidents, like I said.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, anything you do could have an accident.
Anything.
Anything.
Anything at all.
Yeah.
You could walk outside and roll your ankle.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's kind of, you know, we mitigate as much as we can.
Yeah. Did you want to dive a little into the business?
Yeah, I could.
Yeah. So you mentioned community. How do you like? And that's definitely something that you lean into as a business strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Why lean into that so hard? Like there's other approaches you could take, I'm sure, as doing seminars and just having gigantic, like 60 kids in a gymnasium and teaching them all some sort of basics. Why approach it the way you're approaching it now?
So my biggest reasoning for that is that's what I get the most personal gratification from. So anybody can kind of take this super athlete and make them great. You know what I mean? But it takes a truly dedicated individual to his craft to make the average person great. You know, and I think that's where I get my most satisfaction and self gratification from, is by taking the 45-year-old dad who didn't think that he could do anything and turning him into a certified killer who can crush 20-year-olds. You know what I mean? And you see that in people. You talk about that like it's like it's egotistical or like, well, like why would he say that? Why would anybody want to be able to do that? Well, just the self-confidence you get from knowing.
Absolutely.
Like, you know, and it changes people, right? Which is another big part of the community. Like I've seen so many people come through my doors who are completely different people now than when they walked in.
Mm-hmm.
And everything is in a positive light. You know what I mean? For the better. It's
Right.
never for the worse. Ever.
Right. I had a friend say to me one time, I was working in his location, and we were closing with I was closing with a female, and some really sketchy person came in, and like, you know, he was obviously up to something. But in the moment, I didn't feel frightened, and as I was telling the story around the fire at the owner's house, he was saying that's male privilege there, and I was thinking, no, that's not male privilege. That's the fact that I was in the military for over 11 years, and the fact that, you know, I have done some martial arts training, not BJJ, but some. So I don't know if that was because I was a male, and I want to take this to women in BJJ, giving them confidence as well, to be in that situation where I felt comfortable. If the partner or if the coworker that I was with had tremendous training, maybe she too would have felt comfortable.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
So
It gives you more than just, again, the skill or the exercise, right? This is getting back to that. It gives you more than just exercise.
Yeah.
It gives you so much. And I could literally spend an hour just talking about all the benefits, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's my passion.
Right.
Right? Well,
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
no, I want to go back. We kind of got a good handle on the martial arts side of it.
Mhm.
I want to go right on back to where you started in that shed with the 120 pound guy that was training you, that humbled you. And how did it get from that? I mean, you tried it, you got hooked. Okay, I kind of got a good handle on that. But how did you get from there to wanting, is the right terminology, to start your own dojo?
yeah, sure. Yeah, dojo, club, gym, whatever. Yeah, that's all.
How did you get from there to wanting to be more than a student, wanting to be more than someone that participates in the sport? It's okay if I call it a sport. To saying, hey, I want to teach this. Because, you know, you're in the military, you could have been a soldier all your life, or until you retired, you could have picked up a job. You could have been you could have also, sorry, I shouldn't use the word just, but you could have been a teacher of the sport. But you decided to start your own business.
Yeah, so I guess that comes down to, like I said, like knowing what I wanted and the community that I wanted to build. And that's through my own learning. You know, like I say to people all the time, the reason why I'm able to be like this professor of knowledge of jiu-jitsu and all its intricacies is because I've done it wrong for a very long time, right? So I was the young blue belt ego head who crushed women at one point. You know what I mean? I was the guy who needed to be told calm down because everybody's at different stages of their journey, you know? And so through the learning and the adaptation and the growth, I kind of realized you can do that for everybody if you harness this culture. And the culture for me wasn't here in the city.
So you saw an opportunity.
So I saw an opportunity to build something that I'd seen elsewhere that I think desperately needed to be here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, good on you. Take it
Yeah.
up on your shoulders to do that.
Yeah, and like I said, the gratification from that is tremendous, right? It's way better than just coming in and giving a few kind words and leaving at the end of the day. You know what I mean? You truly give some people a place to look forward to going.
Yeah.
And you know yourself, like here in Newfoundland especially, like drugs and alcohol are the prime suspect, right? For laziness and the downfall of this place. And so it pulls people away.
Is so crazy right now. I mean, that's one of the main contributors for homelessness.
Absolutely. And you know, if I can give somebody a place where, hey, I'm not going to drink tonight because I want to wake up tomorrow and I want to feel good at training because I don't want to get crushed, that works for me. If that's where it starts until eventually it grows into something a bit more like, hey, I don't need this in my life, then, you know, steps.
So you are
Baby
taking a
steps.
pretty aggressive approach toward your business. And what I mean by that is you said you're continuously reinvesting everything you make from the business back into the business. I mean, that's a great approach if you really want to focus on scaling and certain aspects and growth in some ways. So why reinvest everything back in the business and not take out some for yourself?
So the main reason why I wanted to reinvest consistently now is because obviously I'm still working my full-time job, so I'm able to, for one. I have the blessing that
So
I'm
is this
able.
a side gig for you?
This is a side gig. I work a 9 to 5, 40 hours a week regular job besides.
Whoa.
And he got up at probably
on.
5:30 this morning to meet me at the gym for 6
So-
and train for an hour before he went to work.
So
and now he's
5
going
days
back
a
to the
week.
gym.
Yeah, 5 days a week. I wake up and I teach privates in the morning, and then I go home. I shower. I grab my lunch that my wife packs for me. I head to my 9 to 5. I get off from there. I come home. I grab my gym bag. I go teach privates, and I teach classes until about 9:30, 10 o'clock that night.
So is your gym open during the day while you're at your 9 to 5?
It's not. No. Currently, it's not, but hopefully with growth and expansion, there's opportunity there as well. You know what I mean? There's lots of places where we can do more.
Whoa, okay. You just blew this wide open here.
Yeah.
Because my next question, I was going to dive into how'd you start the business? Like, clearly, your expertise is in jiu-jitsu, but you didn't tell me anything about any of your expertise in business.
Yeah.
Or how you started
Right.
business, or how you did your accounting, or how you did your marketing, or how you did your sales plan, or how you did your contracts and your disclaimers and all that other stuff.
And
comes from
before
business.
Ryan freaks you out, it's okay to be figuring all that out as you go.
Yeah. No. I appreciate it.
No,
I
it
appreciate
is. I'm just throwing all this out because all you've talked about so far, and I'm trying to keep in mind who's listening to this show. And we have a lot of listeners that are wanting to start a business, that are business people. And the reason that you're here is for a number of reasons. But we want our listeners to get something, not only to learn about you, to learn about your art, to learn about what it is that you do, but also, I keep bringing it back to this, how the hell did you go from being an expert in your art in jiu-jitsu and taking that and starting a business? Because it's all great. It sounds easy.
Right.
I'm just going to start a business. Well, hang on, wait a minute. There's a lot of things that you got to know or figure out. And like Michael kind of said, you can figure these things out along the way. You don't need to be an expert. Would you, I guess I'm asking if you'd agree with that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of taking the chance. Just like he said, anytime you start anything new, you're taking a chance on yourself. So if you have full confidence and believe that it's going to work, you'll work relentlessly to make it happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And a lot of times you don't even need the confidence. I like to say I'm too stupid to know when not to do things. I've done a lot of things in my life. And really just because I don't give a fuck what other people think. And because I want to do them.
Oh, we can swear on this podcast? No, I'm just kidding.
That was good.
My editor Riley puts cat meows over all the
Cat meows.
Hilarious.
I should have just saw it coming like beep.
yeah.
But to answer your question, I won't avoid it. I'll answer your question. So you basically want to know how I went from being a student to now.
I think a lot of people get caught up in the back end details of starting a business and use that as a red tape excuse to start.
To never start.
That's all it is.
To never start. And
That's it.
And it sounds to me like you were just like, no, I love this. I want to do this. And you're just figuring it out. So, yeah. What do you think?
It didn't just happen overnight. I'll say that. So when I moved back into St. John's in the city, I had established a relationship with a guy where I taught down at the military base here.
Right.
Okay, so through my connections with him and through the connections of the two black belts that I mentioned before,
Yeah.
I opened Evolution in the bottom of the Army base here.
Okay.
But I didn't take any of the profits. It was all towards the military, and I just pretty much taught. And this is how I built a foundation. So I got a couple of guys who would come in who were regulars, who obviously seen what I had to offer. They signed up. And so you have a little pool of potential clients already, right? And people say, well, why are you teaching for free? That kind of seems dumb. Well, at the time, it wasn't, because I needed to start somewhere.
Absolutely.
So then through that, I took that little group and I migrated to another gym where they didn't have any grappling. They just had striking, right? So they had Muay Thai at this gym, and I taught the grappling program and the Jiu-Jitsu side of things. And through training and teaching there for so long, I cultivated more bodies and more members.
Yeah.
And then eventually when I was like, okay, how many bodies do we think would come if I started my own place? And so we did the kind of rough, I think so-and-so would come, and I think so-and-so would come. And then it comes down to investors, right? So you got to have somebody willing to invest in you. And thankfully, in my situation, I have great friends who took a chance on me because their investments could have flopped, just like you said.
That's right.
And so they invested in me, and it was enough to, I think, get the materials I needed, like the mats and stuff like that, and pay first month's rent.
Okay.
And so once I had that, and they said, yep, we're willing to do this. This is how it's going to work. And I said, cool, let's go.
Yeah.
And then we hit the ground running. And all the things that you're talking about, like business plan, marketing, all this other, that all came after. I didn't think about any of that. When I first started, it was, I have the people, I can afford the rent, let's go. Let's go for it.
I love it because
That's my favorite way.
honestly, I think that more businesses start off organically like that than our university professors care to admit.
Yes.
I went through a business program. I have a commerce degree. And through that 5-year degree, I did so many business plans and talked about what I was going to do, and more business plans and more writing and more theorizing and more research and more marketing. And when it comes down to it, I really believe, I wish I had a statistic in front of me, but I don't, that true entrepreneurs, the ones that are just going to do it, are quick start type personalities, quick start MOs, who don't have the, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe the patience or the interest in writing out a detailed business plan. We just want to go do it. And once you get yourself and you get that gut feeling and you build yourself up, so you started off in a basement, you worked, then you move to the next step, and then you're like, hang on, this is building momentum. And it wasn't just overnight.
That's right.
You went with your gut.
That's right.
And you said, screw it, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And you figured out a few things you needed, put together random some equipment, and
Bare minimum.
go.
Yep. The bare minimum we needed to make it happen, and we just hit the ground running.
So for the people listening, I will say sometimes that doesn't work.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
But yeah, if you got the gut instinct and you just check off a few boxes, you kind of get a good feel for it, go.
And it's a beautiful gym too, though.
Yeah, you think so? Nice.
Yeah, absolutely. When people walk in, it's nice. It's done well. There's a workout area. So I mean that goes a lot for it as well. You know, you're walking into a professional environment that is set up and ready for you to train.
And you can build that without having a big budget.
That's what I was just about to say. It wasn't always like that.
Yeah.
All the reinvestments was that. You know what I mean? We literally started out with just mats in a building, and it's a concrete floor, and it's just, you know, and then eventually we developed, like I said, I kept working and put everything back into the business, because you talk about reinvesting. I want the community to know that I care. So I want to give them the tools and the things that they need to see success, like a workout area, like a cardio bike, like, you know, different rubber bands or whatever they need. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so when we think about further into the future, like expansion, etc., like if we expand, I'd like to get showers. I'd like to get, you know what I mean? Like you never can settle or become complacent. You always have to try to seek more, I think, in every asset, you know? So
We just chatted. Who were we chatting with about that had that exact mind frame? Was it on our podcast or was I listening to something else? Somebody was just saying they constantly had to be leaning into it, otherwise they felt like they were. Oh, it was the Diary of a CEO. I was watching it last night, and he was saying, I don't know that guy's name. He was saying if I'm not leaning into something, if I'm not leaning into chaos, I don't feel comfortable. He's like, that's when I'm insecure.
Yeah.
Well, I think what Drew's saying too, I think what makes your business special, and there's other businesses like this, is by reinvesting, it is showing that you care. You mentioned that earlier. It is showing that you're not in it for the money. And I think that's a big message to send out there, that I feel like a lot of people want to go into business because they're like, oh, I can make so much money.
And work less.
Right?
Says the guy that's working like over 70 hours a week. Right?
So in reality, it's the opposite.
It is.
You get into business, and when you're reinvesting, you're trying to grow your business. You're actually making less and working more.
Yep.
Yeah. But that's when you need to have that foresight to understand you're actually investing in yourself and you're growing assets.
And you have to understand that, again, motivation's fleeting and discipline's got to stay, right? On those mornings where you don't want to wake up, how bad do you want that gym? How bad do you want to change lives? Do you want to have purpose? Of course you do.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the point?
Yeah.
You know, so it's important to have your main drive factor too, like your mission statement.
Right. Do you have one for BJJ?
I don't, but like it would be somewhere
along
those lines. Yeah, I should have a mission.
I'll put it on the website, of course.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, man.
I read somewhere a long
My
time
chief
ago, mission
website
statements
editor.
are kind of dead though.
What's the new version? Do we need something fresher?
No, I think it's just about the culture. I think it's just about the environment when you walk in. I'm hanging on every word you're saying here about your business and how you treat people and the environment you're creating, and that is something I can tell it's something special.
Definitely,
cool.
Thank you, man, and I appreciate it. It's what I put my most effort into, aside from the technical jiu-jitsu aspect. You know? Right, constantly making sure. Like we went back, we talked about community a little while ago. Like what do I think that entails? Like, man, I've gone to everything of my students, from opera shows to heavy metal shows to, you know, like it's endless what I've gone through to show my support to my students. You know what I mean? Whatever they're interested in outside of jiu-jitsu that motivates them, that gives them that same light that happens to me when I teach, I try to support that the best way that I can. You know what I mean? So like and that is something that you don't see at very many other places.
Absolutely not.
Like, you know what I mean? So people recognize that stuff too. Like I had a gentleman reach out to me today. He's like in his 40s. And told me, you know, he enjoyed my club. Sorry he hasn't been around. I was kind of like, what happened to you? You know, I thought you really enjoyed the place. He's like, oh, I just had a little girl and everything's starting to calm back down. I'm going to come back. I wouldn't dare think about leaving. So even after this duration of 6 to 8 months, his experience in the gym stuck with him throughout the entire time that he was absent. And he couldn't wait to get back.
Yeah.
And so some people would take that as, oh, well, this so-and-so left, and you take it as a negative. Instead, you just, hey, what happened? It's too bad you weren't around. And then before you know it, he's like, hey, I just taking a little break. I'll be back. You're like, missed that.
That reminds me of something.
Yeah, life happens. You know?
I wanted to chat about a little bit. Is there much clickiness between the gyms? Like if one person's training at one gym and he goes to another gym, how is that seen in the community?
So my personal opinion, I think cross-training is nothing but good. Okay? It helps the community grow. Because now people are socializing in different bits. You guys are exchanging different information. So like we said, head coaches are different. So my style and philosophy is different than another gym's. It's different than another gym's. And when you kind of get a taste of everything, you can see where the value is in what. So if somebody says cross-training is a no-no, there's probably a reason for that. Because they're not confident in their product or what they're offering people. Right? Whereas cross-training in my eyes is only good because people can see the value in what I have. Right?
That's just the confidence thing. It's like, yeah, go check them out.
Exactly.
I'm better and I know it. You go over there and check them out.
Exactly. And then you'll see firsthand where you fit. You know what I mean? And some guys choose to fit in with the other gyms, you know, and you'll find your place that you find more comfortable, right? And that's why I say to everybody, like, keep browsing. If you've had an experience at a gym that you don't like, it's probably not jiu-jitsu. It's probably the certain experience or culture, right? Especially as females. If females get into jiu-jitsu or grappling, try a bunch of different gyms because there's a lot of people with the wrong intent the wrong motivators. Don't get discouraged.
Right.
It's just
Have
like
you
anything
seen
else.
women in BJJ grow a lot since you've started?
Women BJJ has grown immensely, like modern times, like within the past like 10, 15 years, we'll say. I think it's because you see more like black belts, more female are becoming proficient in it. So like, I don't want to say women's sports is always behind, right? Because that's kind of words you don't want to use.
Have you seen the WNBA lately?
But
Man,
you know what I
man.
mean? It kind of is that way, you know. Like they're always somewhat behind the males in skill and finances and everything, right? Support.
Yeah.
So now they're finally starting to pick up steam. And I think with that, you're starting to see a more influx of women, but only if you develop and harness a safe culture, right? So like one of my biggest things for getting females on board, I think we have the most females out of any club in the city.
Okay.
Like
there was quite a few.
By a large margin, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's non-comparable. But that comes down to having women's only classes. Mm-hmm. Having a women's instructor lead the class, right? So I'm
Your
very
partner,
fortunate
Ashley, right?
that my partner, Ashley, she's a purple belt in Jiu-Jitsu, right? And so she has experience and she can lead the classes. And there's not many women who stuck around that long with Jiu-Jitsu, right? So she's kind of like an OG woman that is leading the way here on the island for women and practitioners, right? So there's that. When they have a woman who's teaching and instructing, they feel more safe right off the hop.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's more welcoming, and actually she's a gem, right? Like she'll make sure that they feel safe and welcomed. You know, usually when they try the women's class and the co-ed class comes in after, they see what it's like and they try the co-ed class and then they stick around for that, or vice versa. Like the women will try kickboxing. And then they'll see the culture in the kickboxing class and be like, hey, the grappling class is probably not that bad. Mm-hmm. And they'll come try the grappling class. Mm-hmm. You know, so it's kind of like a way to ease them into something that would be very awkward because it's a lot of physical contact. It's pretty awkward at first, right? Especially if you're uncomfortable with it. As a woman, you can especially understand.
Even
right?
for two men.
Yeah, even for two men.
You can especially understand that as a woman, right?
I think as women too, like, not to say that it never happens to males, but you can have certain circumstances with women that could lead them to not want to do martial arts or not want to be put in situations that may be triggering or traumatizing.
Yeah. But
Does
on
that
that
make
same
sense? Where I'm
same
going
note,
with that?
what a great sport for women to know to defend themselves.
To empower.
It's
That's
amazing.
It's the biggest motivator to empower a woman. Like again, you see shy, meek people take complete 180s and turn their lives around and have a backbone and start to take a stand. And, you know, suddenly what would be very triggering before, now suddenly they have the self-confidence in that position because they know things to do if it ever happens.
What would you say the ratio? So in the climbing world, this probably isn't an analogy that everybody would agree with, but I like to believe it's 70-30 technique strength, like 70% technique and then 30% strength. That's my own number I've come up with based on the way I climb. What would you say BJJ is?
It's different for everybody.
Yeah.
It really is different for everybody. Like obviously, if you're a very strong person, you're going to lean towards your strength. Now, at the top level, like the best of the best, I'm thinking it's probably like 60% technique, 70% technique, 30% strength again. Wow. But again, averagely, it depends. If you have a 250-pound man who's full of muscle versus a guy who's 140 pounds, chances are he's going to use more strength and technique against that smaller opponent.
I'm thinking about from a woman's perspective, though, having that technique against somebody who's untrained in martial arts must. Oh,
it's astronomical.
Yeah, astronomical.
It'll still be like play. It'll still be like it'll feel effortless.
Right.
If they've trained for an exponential amount of time.
Yes.
This is not going to come in like 6 months of training jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
This is like years of training, right?
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But yeah, it could absolutely make it so that they feel that way.
Mm-hmm. I think we're getting close to your cutoff because I know you want to make it to your class.
Yeah, no, it's
one recurring segment we have on the show is we like to give listeners and viewers an actionable takeaway, something that they can apply in their life right now. And it could be a personal philosophy. It could be something that you do every day physically or just a habit.
Man, I already got it.
What's that?
Motivation is fleeting.
Yeah, there you go.
That's
Absolutely.
my takeaway.
But how does somebody action that? You know, what's something that somebody can do to just start taking action or start to change their life in a positive direction, even if it's something very small and simple? What's something you do personally?
Just stop making excuses and take ownership.
It's funny, actually.
That's just blanket statement
That
in
one-
all aspects.
That one rings a bell with me because when I was chatting with Drew about coming to class, one day I was like, man, I had a brutal day today, and I was like, oh, and it's a gi class, and I really didn't want to start doing the gi classes until I did a bunch of no gi, because I figure with no gi, that's more, I don't know, this is just my own interpretation, it's more relatable to actual real world scenarios, right? You're not going to have a gi on where you can leverage and pull them in certain ways. So I was like, I don't know if I'm going to come to class tonight. And I gave him this analogy of like, I almost feel like in a gi, I feel like a novice with a knife, you know, like someone who's more experienced is just going to take the knife and stab me with it, you know, and get choked out, which is what I was saying.
Drew's looking
and Drew was like, he was like, just stop thinking and train. And I was like, okay. So I came to class and it was great.
Yeah. You can build up whatever you want in your head.
Yeah.
That's what anxiety is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if you find that you're anxious because you're nervous about doing something, head first, man, into the fire.
Yeah, that
Right.
reminds me of the 3-second rule. A general rule that applies in every scenario. If you want to do something, you got 3 seconds to do it. If it takes you longer than 3 seconds, then you're probably not going to do it because you've waited too long.
See, that kind of reminds me of when I was learning how to ride a motorcycle. You know, you're just saying, like, if you're thinking about this, you're focusing, you're going to go headlong to the fire. If you're on a bike, you learn how to ride it, and you don't want to hit that post over there, you should probably stop looking at that post.
That's right.
Because then you're going to go towards.
That's right. It's the skier's mentality.
Yeah.
Right? Don't stare at the trees or else you're going to hit a tree.
You're going to hit the tree.
Right? So it's the same thing. Don't think about all the reasons why you shouldn't or why not to. Stop making excuses. Just do it.
Yeah.
Work hard.
Also, a good philosophy for starting a business, because I think that a lot of red tape, the best way through red tape, or is not around it, but through it. There's red tape. What are you going to do about it? You're going to go through it. Sometimes you can't get around it. You're just going to have to bulldoze through it. Like, I'll figure it out on the way. I'm just going to make it happen.
Yep.
This is what I want, so I'm going to work towards that, and I'm not going to let anything stop me.
Yep. I will say towards like the business side of things, like for your listeners on the business side, is network. Because you can't do anything alone, despite how much you think you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Good advice.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Sweet.
There's your takeaway.
Yeah.
Network.
Well, thanks, Drew. Appreciate you
no
being
sweat.
on the show.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank
It was
you.
awesome. It's deadly.